not about eagles. He's all about fish. So you got to think, why on earth did she bring a fish guy into an eagle festival? Well, other than the fact that eagles love fish, when we're taking a look at a few eagles, a small population, some individuals, and we care so much about those. What Jim does, he's a big picture thinker, big idea thinker, and he's looking at the big picture conservation-wise. And that's what he's done for more than 30 years with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. He now serves as the director of the Berkeley Conservation Institute, which is a branch of Pure Fishing. And Pure Fishing is the largest fishing tackle company in the world. And so he's done a lot over the years with conservation and looking at the big picture. How do the individuals fit into the big picture, and how do we keep this big picture intact? So Jim's going to come talk to you today about what he does and some issues about that. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Jim Martin.
It's so nice to be here. Being a West Coast guy, normally when I come to the East Coast, I'm going directly to Washington, D.C. and jumping right in the middle of the sausage making and political turmoil and hassle, and it's usually fairly stressful. And so this time I get to kind of lower the tempo and do a little kayak fishing and learn some more about eagles. And it's just so enjoyable to be here and to meet you guys. I have to say, though, the next time I negotiate my talk, it's going to be not following Ed Clark, which sets me up, follow the rock star with the eagle. Oh, God, did I screw up? I failed to negotiate properly. But to tell you the truth, I've known Ed a long time. And we served shoulder to shoulder and side by side through many battles on the board of the National Wildlife Federation. And I have to tell you, I get to work with some of the most extraordinary people in the world. People who have dedicated themselves to conservation, people who have studied all their life, fish and wildlife, people who have decided not to go up into the wilderness and measure deer antlers, but instead to get right involved in the swirling political tornado of policy where we think we can make the most difference. And Ed is one of the finest fish and wildlife people I've ever known. And I've never known anybody who loved animals more than Ed, or who loved people more than Ed. And I was thinking as I was listening to his talk, and he was gently ribbing you guys about being a couple bubbles off Plum. And you were laughing and nodding, and you know what he's talking about. And I thought, what a wonderful way of characterizing the fundamental change in fish and wildlife conservation in this country. From in the old days, fish and wildlife biologists would have gone out and talked to the local duck club members. And now we're talking to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people about fish and wildlife conservation via the internet. And it doesn't come easy for some of us. For some of us, adjusting to, welcome to our blog, Ed. 75,000 people are online. The average fish and wildlife biologist in the average fish and wildlife agency in this country would just like deer in the headlights. What do I say? But I was thinking as I was listening to the conversation this morning, every fish and wildlife director in every state fish and wildlife agency in the country should hear this talk. Because this talk is about how conservation is changing in our lifetime. And I've been doing this for 43 years, and I'm looking forward to doing it as long as I can, maybe 10 or 15 more, just to see how this translation changes. And it's interesting to reflect on this Eagle Conference and another Eagle Conference I know about that I wanted to tell you about. I was born in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Klamath Falls, Oregon is a small town in eastern Oregon. It's kind of on the dry side, on the east side of the Cascades, and the rain shadow of the wet side, the west side. It's sagebrush country, it's logging country, it's ranching country, it's hunting country. And it's right at the big bottleneck of the Pacific Flyway. There are 3 or 4 great big national wildlife refuges there. There's the massive Klamath Lake. It historically was the gateway to the California Central Valley, where all the waterfowl would historically have wintered. And as long as I can remember from the time I was born, I can remember the massive migrations of waterfowl coming down the Pacific Flyway. And the eagles followed them. And the eagles have always been there, preying on the waterfowl, and particularly in the winter gathering. A lot of those Arctic, remember Libby was showing us how that Pacific Flyway comes down from the Arctic, and they move south to avoid the ice and the snow, and they follow the waterfowl. Essentially like the lions follow the wildebeest in Africa, they just kind of come with them. And for years and years and years and years, Klamath Falls, Oregon just basically kind of noticed, oh yeah, there's a bunch of eagles too. But we're about logging, and we're about ranching, and we're about hunting, and that's kind of the centerpiece of our economy. Very much like many rural western communities. And then a crazy nutcase, 2 bubbles off plum biologist, hero friend of mine named Ralph Opp, who was the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, my old agency. He was the district wildlife biologist. He said, you know, there's a lot of people interested in these eagles. We could bring some experts in, and we could take advantage of a lot of these bird watchers that are coming down to look at the waterfowl and the eagles, and we could put together a little evening symposium, maybe have some wine and cheese, and I'll bet you, you know, we might even take them out to the refuges on some show-me tours, and, you know, and people said, are you kidding me? This is about logging and ranching and hunting, what the hell? And now that Eagle Festival, over the last 25 years, has grown into this massive thing in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And yes, it's still about logging and timber and hunting in Klamath Falls, but it's also about that Eagle Festival. And that community attracts people from all over the world to come see that massive flyout of eagles that come out of the Bear Valley every morning. And then they have talks like this, talking about conservation and policy. They have eagle experts coming in talking about ecology and migration, just exactly like we had last night. What an excellent program that was, and Libby's program today in Greece. And they have artists come in, and they have wine companies come in with special labels that have eagles on them, and they talk about them, and they celebrate them, and the whole community looks at it and says, holy crap, it's the middle of the winter and all the hotels are full. It's the middle of the winter and you can't get a reservation in any of our good restaurants. It's the middle of the winter and the refuges are all buzzing. It's the middle of the winter and people are flocking here like the birds. And they got a little wake-up call that this is about the economy. And while hunting and fishing numbers in this country are declining, wildlife enthusiasts numbers in this country are exploding. And so as I was sitting here, thinking about here we are in Norfolk, Virginia, I was thinking about my old hometown where I was born, Klamath Falls, Oregon, and how that's been transformed, and how America is being transformed, and how the world is being transformed, and how for a lot of people in fish and wildlife agencies, that's really scary. That's really scary. They're not used to electronic communication. They're not used to meetings with 75,000 people online. They're interested in talking to the old duck club or the Deer Hunters Association or people that are manageable and traditional and basically are a dying breed. Now what I do is get involved in the sausage making. What I do is jump right in the middle of a swirling political tornado, and I teach all of my students, if you're not working in the middle of the swirling political tornado, you're not working on anything very important. So you can go up in the wilderness and measure deer antlers and have a nice life. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. In my lifetime, fish and wildlife agencies have gone from the sports page to the front page. Instead of being the maker of trivial decisions like when the deer season opens, we're the trusted advisor on astronomically important decisions like what about our water? What about our land? What about the growth of the Chesapeake Bay community here? How will we live in some harmony, no matter how we might argue about smaller things, even argue violently about smaller things? There's two things we will always share in common. One is we love where we live, and two is we care about our kids. And at the end of the day, the big issues of the day are, what are we going to do about this rate of growth? What are we going to do about our waste? Where's our energy going to come from? What are we going to do about our transportation infrastructures? And is there a way for wildlife to live in harmony with us? You know, this was a good news symposium. It's wonderful to look at the recovery of the bald eagle, not only here, but across this country. It's one of the magnificent conservation success stories of our time. And it's one of the rare success stories of our time. I come from salmon country, and the salmon are in deep yogurt. They are in trouble. They are at the southern edge of their range. By the time 2100 comes, where I live in Portland, Oregon, we'll have 4 times as many people and essentially the climate of San Francisco. 4 times as many people in the climate of San Francisco. And the issue of the day is, how do we get ready for that future? And right now, what we're facing in this country is a colossal clash of values. If you're reading the paper, if you're looking at the websites, if you're watching the television, what you see is in Washington, D.C., we have gridlock like we have never had gridlock in the history of this country. As 2 giant sets of opposing points of view come into collision as to where we're going in terms of the priorities of this country. And I want to be right smack in the middle of that, and I want you to be right smack in the middle of that too. Hi, I'm Jim Martin. I'm presenting at the Eagle Conference in Norfolk, and I give Christina permission to post any and everything I say, and I hope the whole dang world looks at it.